Silence reigns across the landscape. Eerie fog rolls in, coating everything in an unsettling mist. Herds huddle uncomfortably within its damp embrace, listening, waiting. They feel its approach before they hear it. The ground quivers beneath their feet, and they look up as the fog clears. Great, booming footfalls. Not a threat, simply a promise. Flee now, or perish. I've been waiting for months now to give Rex a proper go. My previous attempts to grow one were met with the usual annoyances. Cheaters everywhere, or mixpacking clans. Thankfully, the time has come to return home, to my own server. To fairness. Early life involves a lot of staying out of sight. When you're small and vulnerable, everything seeks your demise. Another fresh spawn Rex added me to a group. I wasn't exactly looking for companionship, but when you're a baby, life is fleeting. And sure enough, my companion didn't last very long. Ultimately, the time came to leave the not-so-safe sanctuary and head off into the unknown. Travel was necessary if I wanted to become the strongest version of myself someday. And travel I did. All the way to the bush plains in south, where I hoped to find some delicious juvenile herbivores hiding out. I didn't find what I was seeking, but I did find something else. Land dino. For obvious reasons, I hadn't had the opportunity to mess with a land dino on Rex before. But I can't resist the pull of picking on them when I see them. I just needed to get my bite timing right. Finally, I made him bleed. Haha, success. And then he made me bleed too, and I decided it was probably time to leave. Growth is slow as an apex. I healed up nicely and moved toward West Rail to nibble some turtles and deer. It was there that I spotted my first proper target, a juvenile aloe. He seemed a bit put out that the trikes didn't intervene on his behalf when I attacked. So put out, in fact, that he had attempted to force them to intervene by pouncing one of them. Now that's a mistake there, because by attacking the trike, now he had 2 targets on his back instead of 1. By nightfall, I was back in Delta. My intention was to go northeast to visit the lake and see if anyone was hanging out over there. I paused for 1 second to check my weight, and got pounced by a raptor at the same moment. Now, forgive my panic. The brain shut off, and fight or flight kicked in hard. Flight being the one that took over. I needed to get this thing off my back. Now. New problem. Rex is an incredibly slow swimmer. I couldn't quite outpace the raptor to get somewhere safe to hide if I swam away. But he also seemed to forget that he was much faster in water than me. Cornered, out of options, reason finally returned. If the raptor couldn't pin me, then it was very, very likely that I could pin him. And just like that, the tables turned. Now I had a dilemma. I was on an island. As a slow swimmer, I wasn't really very hungry. Staying was dangerous. I contemplated momentarily. The intestines. I'd just take the intestines and then I'd get out of here. Too late. I'd been found by exactly what I hoped to avoid. He wasn't big enough to grab me on land, but was almost certainly large enough to grab me in water. And I was too injured to tank him while swimming, even if grabbing was out of the question. My only option was to try and kill him. Much easier said than done, though, when I was so severely injured. When he returned to the water, I knew I was really in trouble. I could hope that I'd grow a tick and be too heavy to grab before he came back at me. In fact, that was my only option now. And so I stood in silence, in the thickest part of the island, watching, listening, waiting. As the sun began to rise, my time was up. Ahead, bubbles rippled on the surface of the river. Dino there. And to my left, the other lunged at me. Nowhere to go, nowhere to turn. At least I could go down fighting. I won't subject you to the dullness that was standing in Sanctuary for a couple of hours and eating AI for another couple of hours to regrow. Instead, we'll jump forward in time. I had wandered to East. Not because I expected to find anyone, but simply because when I play, I never stop moving. Surprisingly enough, though, I heard fighting. 2 juvenile raptors were attacking a little stego. One that was within range for me to reasonably hunt. I watched for a while as the raptors wore down the stego, draining its stamina with their baits and attacks. When one of the 2 finally died, I prepared myself for the attack. I would target the remaining raptor first to remove it from the equation, then take out the stegling. My plan was executed almost flawlessly. The raptor fled, and I began my attack on the tired and injured stego. Though I wasn't being very careful, I anticipated taking him down long before he could drop me. And then I heard the stomps. I looked up to see a massive adult Rex. 2. I turned to run and passed a third, smaller one. Yikes. But of course they couldn't just let me flee. The one my size gave chase, little twerp. I stopped to face him, and he missed his crush. Mine didn't miss. Neither did my follow-up fight. He turned tail, running back toward his parents. I could have stayed to fight, but I'm not stupid. With line of sight broken, I darted away down the hill to lie down and heal off my bleed. He did loop back to look for me in the bush I'd previously attacked him in, but he didn't find me. Hours passed. Living on AI was getting more and more difficult. I was simply getting too big for boars to do much for me. Thankfully, I spotted an aloe rushing through Highlands, not paying much attention to his surroundings. I had some food now, but not nearly enough. Bush plains had not netted me many meals, and I was getting worried. I was checking one last place I knew herbivores liked to hide, when a prime carno attempted to charge me. Honestly, being stunned when he hit me should have been his warning to find a better target. Something that wasn't literally 4 tons, perhaps. But he seemed to want the fight, and I wasn't going to turn down a carno steak if it so willingly wanted to drop itself in my lap. Unfortunately, with how big I was getting, even 1.8 tons of carno meat didn't last long in my belly. By the time I reached Highlands again, I was ravenous once more. A single galley carcass sat untouched on the plains. That looked absolutely enticing. It wasn't a big meal, but it was food. After eating, I turned around and spotted a baby Rex peeking out of the bushes. Figured why not go knock him over, because it's funny. I learned very quickly that that was a mistake when Big Papa stood up and loomed menacingly over me. Stole their bait and knocked over their child. It's time to get out of Dodge. One loop around the lake and back down the hill toward Delta. I noticed another, much bigger, more dangerous aloe on the next hill over. I wasn't fast enough to chase him, but if he came at me, I could fight back. I hoped for the latter option. I needed the food. To all those who insist that bucking is useless, remember that it's RNG based. Sometimes it'll work immediately, sometimes it won't. Luck was on my side this time. The aloe was injured. Too injured to survive another crush. I wouldn't go hungry again today. I was nearly an adult now. Ahead, I'd heard raptors. How many, I wasn't sure, but with their recent bleed and damage increase, they weren't something to mess around with. Not even as an apex. I did a quick head count, and only saw 3 adults and a couple of juveniles. They were nesting. If I could land an ambush, I could hopefully get a little snack. I missed my crush, but ate their meal. In very typical raptor fashion, they opted to defend their nest. Maybe not the best idea. Not against an adult Rex. I was hungry though, so the more fight they had, the more food I would get. With 2 adults now dead and the third still angrily hissing at me, I noticed another Rex in the distance, and decided I'd best get to cover before they came any closer. You can't trust Rexes. The raptors didn't give up, though. They were mad. Didn't they realize this was a losing battle? The final adult fell, and the 2 adolescents backed off. Looked like Mother Dearest came back as a fresh spawn, though. That's a choice. The next time I logged in, I made my way to Delta. I was getting incredibly desperate. I hadn't had a single large meal in days. AI was barely keeping me alive. I was in a constant state of being in and out of red. I needed a meal. A real meal. And I needed it now. A dino swam by in the river, and actually seemed keen to try me. I hoped that maybe, if it would come close enough, I could get incredibly lucky and pin it. He didn't look prime. It was a short dance. My crush didn't pin him, and he decided that it wasn't worth losing his life to bother a primate Rex. Unfortunate for me. I moved on, grabbing a deer to stop my health from draining for another minute. Across the river, I spotted something perfect in the distance. A prime Maya. But it appeared to have seen me, too. Likelihood of catching one of those was incredibly low. All I could do was try. Unfortunately for me, by the time I got to the gate, they were gone. Off into the forest. I didn't have time to risk going in the wrong direction. I turned back to the AI I could hear calling. Fog rolled in as I grabbed a drink and rushed aboard. But I saw the other Rex crouch and hide, and quickly did the same. I didn't want to kill other Rexes if I could help it. I had avoided doing so for a long time. But I was hungry. And sometimes, desperation leads you to choices you wouldn't otherwise make. attack first. That was what mattered. He chose to attempt to flee. Unfortunately for him, running away wouldn't save him. Cannibalism wouldn't benefit my health, but at the very least I wouldn't starve anymore. Another day passed. I logged in and still had spasms from my rather unhealthy meal, but the Mayas existed somewhere, and I was going to find them. I tracked their calls through Delta and into Northeast. Thick fog rolled in, though, making it difficult to see exactly where they were. I had to be careful that they didn't see me before I saw them. Otherwise, the ambush would fail, and they'd run away. As the fog began to clear, I spotted them in the near distance. There wasn't enough cover here to effectively ambush them, but I was going to try. When they spotted me, I walked out into the open. No need for false pretenses now. There was no point. They'd either risk the fight, or they would avoid me. In the meantime, I'd get a drink. The rain came back in as I left the water's edge, and as I watched the two primes, I noticed that one of the younger Mayas was lying down just up the hill. If I could get close enough without them realizing I'd seen them. Well, I had a meal. I didn't need it as desperately this time, but I was still happy to have it. I wouldn't let it go to waste. The Mayas, though, didn't feel inclined to leave me in peace. One of them hovered around, being a little goober as I sat. Eventually, food gone, I turned to leave. Still sneezy, though. They called after me, and I responded in turn before continuing on my way. I wanted to go south, but I decided to wait out my spasms first before traveling. By the time those spasms were finally gone, I was getting hungry again. I'd need to find something edible soon. Still, I hoped that I could get to the Highlands and find a trike or a stego hanging out there. I'd heard a few around. Maybe I'd get lucky? Unfortunately, I saw a couple of other Rexes on the island as I was passing through Delta. Not wanting to risk it, I decided I'd cross higher up than planned and continue through the area from across the river. A lovely idea. Until I heard 2 more adult Rexes on the side I'd just crossed to. And they were much closer than the ones I'd already seen. Shoot. I'd take my chances with the ones that were further away. I started to swim across. And fatal errored in the middle of the river. Oh. Frantically, I fought to reconnect to the server, hoping that the other Rexes wouldn't notice my silly Rex stuck in the middle of the river. I loaded in and was still alive, but only just. No stamina. Drowning. I was going to freaking drown! My head broke the surface milliseconds before death. Holy crap. The other Rexes were still right there, but with no stamina I had no choice but to sit and regain what I could before moving on. Once my stamina returned, I opted to pass around the edge of the island and cross at my original intended passage point. It was incredibly unsettling, of course, to see 2 other Rexes lying down behind a rock. And 2 more dead on the far edge of the river. Well, someone killed someone and I didn't know exactly who or where they were. It could have been the ones I saw. It could have been the ones I heard on the other side. Either way, despite my hunger, I made the choice not to eat from the dead Rexes. Would that be a fatal mistake with my hunger levels already so low? Time would only tell. I made it to Highlands, absolutely desperate. I was seriously regretting not eating from the Rexes in Delta. Behind me, raptors. Ahead, trikes. Raptors would be the easier hunt. They clearly already wanted me. But the trikes would be more profitable if I could catch one alone. One raptor sacrificed itself to me, but I was locked on a trike that was pretty far separated from the rest. Frustratingly, the raptors distracted me just enough to lose sight of my target. By the time I spotted the birds flying in the distance, I knew he was making his way back toward the other trikes. I didn't have time to wait. I kept on my target. I could hear the herd ahead. This was not a good idea, but I was so hungry I no longer cared. It's better to go down fighting. Better to risk the most dangerous hunt rather than starve to death. One was apart from the rest still, or so it appeared. Two herds. Two entirely separate herds. Well. That wasn't great. And the annoying little raptor flies still being obnoxious and draining my stamina further. Most of the trikes backed off, but the biggest one caught up. I was bleeding out, dead either way. I chose to make it hurt. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure to leave a like and comment your thoughts below. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for more content like this. Thanks, and I hope to see you again soon.